Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Park Boulevard Presbyterian Church. Today is Sunday, March 14th, 2021, and it's the fourth Sunday of the season of Lent. We're continuing in our sermon series on the Gospel of John. Today we'll be on John chapter 10, and we're going to be talking about sheep. Yes, sheep. Sheep are among the most helpless of animals when they aren't being watched over, especially when they're weighed down by their very heavy woolen coat. The heavy wool keeps them from being able to move around quickly, from being adept, especially when the wool gets wet. I heard a story years ago about a modern day shepherd who was looking after his sheep and realized that a few of them were missing. He eventually found them and they were cast. So a cast sheep is a sheep that has rolled over on its back, and because of how heavy its wool is, it's unable to roll itself back over to get right side up. And while this image might be rather humorous of this upside down sheep with its legs kind of kicking around, it's actually really dangerous for the sheep. The sheep are helpless, they're unable to eat, they're unable to drink. Eventually, they are exhausted. But worst of all, they are completely helpless to predators that might come along the way. Birds can actually land right on top of their stomach and have a free meal. So this shepherd, as he found these sheep, one of them was still alive, but a couple of them were too far along and didn't make it. So sheep are vulnerable creatures. And it's not necessarily flattering that in the Bible, God's people are compared to sheep oftentimes. Basically, what it's saying is that on our own, we are vulnerable to the deceit of those who would try to take advantage of us, hurt us, kill us even. But we're also vulnerable to our own mistakes, our pride, our sin, our wandering off after our own ideas and opinions. We need a shepherd who will guide us and protect us and bring us to our true home. So I'm going to read now from the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verses 1 through 18, if you'd like to follow along. Hear the word of the Lord. Very truly, I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father." This is the word of the Lord. Well, the image of the shepherd was used throughout the Old Testament of the Bible to describe the relationship of both God and the king to the people of Israel. Some of the greatest leaders began their careers as literal shepherds, such as Moses and King David. David, in fact, wrote the best-known psalm, Psalm 23, which is all about how God is our shepherd. I'm sure you've heard it. And David knew what he was talking about after all those years of being a shepherd. So when Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd," he is using a familiar image. But Jesus here is also claiming for himself a title that has been reserved for the King of Israel as well as for God. Now, while the language of shepherds and sheep bring to mind pleasant pastoral images, in fact, when I was a kid, I had a picture up on the wall of my bedroom of Jesus as a shepherd, a painting of Jesus there with the sheep around him, this beautiful green pasture with this stream flowing through it. And it was really lovely and very comforting and very peaceful. But the reality was that shepherds actually did very hard, very dirty, and sometimes very dangerous work that demanded 24-hour-a-day vigilance and commitment. Unlike hired shepherds who had no personal investment in the flock, the good shepherd has a completely different interest in his sheep. And we're going to look at just a few aspects here about what makes the good shepherd different. Now, in the Mediterranean world, so first of all, the good shepherd calls his sheep by name. The good shepherd calls his sheep by name. In the Mediterranean world, shepherding was and still is a very personal affair. Shepherds spent much of their time, so much of their time with their sheep that they got to know their sheep individually, and they had names for each one of them. They knew the tiniest differences that set them apart from one another, and they knew each one's idiosyncratic behavior. Each one of them was unique and special. Now, the sheep also knew the shepherd's voice. The shepherd would call to them, and they would recognize his voice, and they would follow the shepherd. Now, in most places of the world, shepherds drive their flocks from behind. But in the Mediterranean world, shepherds actually lead their sheep. They walk in front of them, and the sheep follow after them. The sheep know to do this. They're trained to do this. The shepherd knows what the sheep need. They follow him. They follow his voice. In the word of the 23rd Psalm, the shepherd leads them beside still waters and makes them lie down in green pastures. His sheep are also willing to follow him into scary places because they trust that their shepherd will protect them. Even when they walk through the darkest valley or the valley of the shadow of death, the sheep are comforted because the shepherd is not only right there with them, but the shepherd is actually leading them through this difficult place. Our good shepherd knows each of us by name. He knows all about us. He knows all of the unique details of our lives and our personality, everything that makes us who we are. And he calls us by name to follow after him. He knows what we need, and he's walking right with us through those difficult times. So the question for us is, are we learning to recognize, to hear? Are we listening for the voice of the Good Shepherd, to know what Jesus sounds like when he is calling us to follow him? So the Good Shepherd calls his sheep by name. The Good Shepherd also is the gate. Now, we might wonder, well, which is it? Is he the Good Shepherd or is he the gate? It might seem like a strange mixing of metaphors here, but it's actually not as strange as it might sound at first. Again, Mediterranean shepherds and sheep are unique in the sense that they had special sheep pens that were usually round, and they had an opening at the front. Now, these sheep pens could be made of wood or branches. Oftentimes, the permanent ones were made of stone. So imagine a circular enclosure with a stone wall about 4 or 5 feet tall, with an opening about 4 or 5 feet wide. The sheep go in through the opening and they spend the night in this enclosure. Now, that opening is the gate, but there's no actual gate there most of the time. There's nothing that swings open or shut. Rather, the shepherd himself would sleep in that space. He would sleep with his body across that opening and become himself the gate for the sheep. He'd be careful who he allowed into the pen, and he would also make sure to protect the sheep who were there from any kinds of predators or thieves who would want to come in and steal the sheep. This presents for us a wonderful image of Jesus as a shepherd who is constantly watching over his flock. He doesn't put his sheep into the pen and then go off to have a comfortable night's sleep in the nearest town, hoping that everything will be all right. But rather, he's right there with the sheep, making sure that he doesn't lose a single one of them. Now, at the same time, this is one of the bold truth claims of Jesus. The sheep pen only has one way in, and that is through the shepherd, Jesus. This strikes our modern ears perhaps as uncomfortably exclusive, but the original hearers would have heard it as just the opposite, as uncomfortably broad in scope, because Jesus is saying that he has other sheep who are not yet a part of this fold. We can assume that by this fold, Jesus is referring to Israel, to the Jews to whom he is speaking, and that the other sheep are the rest of the world, the other nations. Jesus has come into the world to save all people. The shepherd's flock is amazingly diverse and made up of all kinds of sheep, but the gate by which these sheep enter is Jesus himself. So Jesus knows his sheep by name. The good shepherd is the gate. And finally, the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. Now, this is the most amazing and surprising quality of the good shepherd. Now, the hired hand, the hired shepherds, they'll run away when there's danger. A hired shepherd is not expected to risk his life for the sheep because they're not his sheep. And you know what? I would say even a normal owner of the sheep, while he might be willing to take some risks, is probably not going to lay down his life for his sheep. Even though they are his livelihood, he's not going to lay down his life for them. The good shepherd, though, does. The good shepherd willingly chooses to lay down his life for his sheep. Now, why would the shepherd do this? The simple answer is that the good shepherd loves his sheep. He knows their names and he leads them. He guards them and protects them. He's there for them so they can have life and have it abundantly. And when the time comes, this same love leads him to give his own life so that the sheep can live. Now, of course, Jesus here is predicting what he is going to do in a short time, and that is that he is willingly going to go to Jerusalem. He is going to confront the religious leaders there. He's going to offer himself up. Of course, he'll be arrested. He'll be put on a false trial, wrongly accused, wrongly condemned, and then crucified, put on that cross. And Jesus is saying, this isn't something that's just going to happen to him, but this is something that he is willingly going to do, and that he is going to do it for us, for his sheep, for his flock, and he's doing it so that we can live. This is the message of the gospel, friends, that God has welcomed all people into his presence, into his flock, by providing us with a good shepherd who knows us, loves us, and chooses to lay down his life for us so that we might have the life that God wants to give us. Well, as much as we might not like to admit it, we are like sheep in need of a shepherd. None of us is able on our own to be the people that God has created us to be. Jesus is the good shepherd. He invites us into his flock, knows us by name, and his sheep know his voice. Jesus is the gate, the one who protects his sheep and wants them to have abundant life. And Jesus is the good shepherd who lays down his life for his sheep. God bless you, friends. Have a great week.